figure out why they invited me. I'm actually not kidding. But anyways, what this whole session is about me trying to do as much for you guys as possible. Share all the nitty-gritty, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything about really two different parts of entrepreneurship. So talking about leadership is kind of vague, so I wanted to break it down into two parts. How many of you guys want to start your own company in one day? Just raise a hand. Okay. Thank God this presentation is tailored to you. For those of you who don't, you're going to have to suffer through the next 45 minutes or go to food. But anyways, it's really focusing on two different parts. It's about building the company and then leading said company. So, quick ask. We are all over social media. We would absolutely love if you took like 5 seconds and whipped out your smartphone and just be like, Soapbox Soaps, follow, I don't know, tweet, something. I'm not good with the social medias or the internets, just not in any way, shape, form. So I'll come back to this slide later.
Do you follow back?
Do I what?
Follow back?
Yeah, sure. If I knew how to. Someone in our team knows how to. But we'll start with this.
Oh.
Right. So this is my oldest brother. And the reason I show this picture is because if you have this as your older brother, you learn a couple pretty important lessons. One lesson is you're probably going to lose. And no matter how many times you fight Rob, you're going to lose. So here's some of the biggest things I learned about basically having Rob as a brother, is that no matter how many times you get socked in the face, you still have to pick yourself back up. A lot of that can be directly transferred over to entrepreneurship. Funny side note, Rob went off to do football, I did cross country. If I could run faster than him, it didn't matter how big he was.
Or you can run farther.
Yeah, right, but usually he'd just punch me and I'd wake up somewhere. So, what I want to talk about is really two different things. So you have an idea, how do you build it? Once you start seeing some success in that idea, how good Lord. It's the problem when you're addicted to coffee and you haven't had coffee, then you're just like a mumbling idiot. Yeah. All right, so anyways, what I want to talk about is building said company and then leading that company. So, let's say you have an idea. Great idea, your friends may not understand it, you think it's the best thing in the world, what do you do next? Well, first off, a lot of you people are going to think it's such an amazing idea that you're just like, I can't tell anyone. It's going to blow people's minds. Like, as soon as I release this to the public, everyone's going to immediately understand I'm a genius. Two things that's true for. One, if you come up with a cure for cancer, yes, get that patented, don't tell people. Two, anything like pharmaceutical rated, yeah, go ahead and get that patented. But I'll tell you what, most ideas, either in tech or consumer product good or service related, has been thought of before and has either failed or it's been marginally successful or it's been wildly successful. Google was the 17th search engine. 17th. It didn't stop them. Now, to Google something is to search engine something. So you have an idea. First thing you should do, tell a lot of people. It seems big, like contradictory. You're like, what? No. As soon as someone tells me. And the thing is, people always tell their mom. That's the go-to. And if it's a tech company, your mom's gonna be like, that's great, honey, you want a PB&J? You're like, Mom, listen to like Twitter app for like cool people. Like, it's gonna be called like twitappplus.co, right? So, the first thing is talk to a lot of people. They're gonna make your idea 30 times better. And you also have to be humble to listening to their advice because twitter.coolplus.co may actually have some wings, but not with that name. And until your friend that you're getting beers with goes, dude, sucky name. And you're like, you don't know, like I'll be Steve Jobs before you know it, right? So yeah, good for you. You have the first thing, which is you're going to get up after you get punched. But the more important thing is you're actually going to listen to what that punch should have taught you. So, you have an idea. What now? Test it. One of the original co-founders of Zappos did something really genius. He went out to a local shoe store, took pictures of shoes, didn't even buy any inventory, went home, programmed a simple e-commerce site, and just wanted to test, will people buy shoes from an online site? Turns out they did. So then you had to actually go out to Nordstrom and buy the shoes. But now let's play that the other way. You guys ever hear of pets.com? Anyone? Okay, yeah, oh my God. I am not that much older than you guys, and I am now feeling really old. But anyways, specifically pets.com went out and bought tons and tons of pet food. They scaled pretty much like a 300 million raise. And they got it because this was before the dot-com boom. And they said, guess what? We're going to be able, through economies of scale, get pet food for so much cheaper, and we're going to be able to ship it all over the world. The big problem with their whole plan, shipping costs a lot when you're shipping 50 pounds of dog food. Womp womp. So here's the thing. Before you go out and quit your day job, which I know a lot of entrepreneurs who are like 20, 30, 40 years out, they're like, well, all you have to do is pull yourself up by the bootstraps and quit your day job and do it today, and you'll be a millionaire tomorrow, right? That's because they're so far removed. Realistically, don't quit your day job until you've proven that initial assumption. So a lot of this is repackaged lean startup theory by Eric Ries. Funny because Eric Ries was actually repackaged from Professor Blank from Stanford, and then before that, there was a lot of just simple metrics like economies of behavior and stuff in the 1950s. So basically it's test. You have to test the simple assumption. What is your crux? This is what we did. So what SoapBox is we are a social mission company that sells bar soap, liquid hand soap, body wash. We're rolling out with shampoo, lotions, conditioner, all that different stuff. And why we do that is because I used to work for the United States Agency for International Development. While working there, we did a bunch of different clean water initiatives around the world. We put wells in, we built filtration systems, and what really bothered me is, one, the type of aid we were doing, because it was more like basically the United States government coming in to a developing world and be like, you guys need a well, and they're like, actually we need schools, and they're like, you guys need a well. So what really bothered me about that was just how we were doing development. And I was like, you know what, that's not how I want to do it. So we started a soap company because every time we put a well in, you'd see a bunch of kids basically run up and wash their hands, but there wasn't something as simple as a bar of soap. Okay, so you have clean water, but you also need something then to remove the harmful bacteria that can cause typhoid, acute respiratory diseases, diarrhea, stuff that kills, unfortunately, thousands and thousands of people every day. The simple act of this can do a lot for public health. So that's why we started. Now, here was the first assumption. It was, will people pay just a little bit more for the same quality product with a social mission? So my co-founder and I, who looks like a big, gigantic, like Swede, him and I stood on Swede, as in like, Sweden, that type of stuff. I know some of you are like, wait, did he just say? And I'm like, no. So anyway, if you don't know what that means, then good for you. Seriously, your mind is no far gone than mine. But anyways, this basically is what we did. We stood on the corners of streets and just asked people, hey, would you buy this? Now the funny thing is, with this gigantic tall man and me looking like this, standing on street corners, a lot of times people were like, no, thank you, Jehovah's Witnesses. And I'm like, whoa, 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 we're just trying to sell you soap. And they're like, that's even worse. So specifically, like, we were just like, hold on. Like, we just want to see, would you buy this? Okay, what do you think this is in relation to other things like on this little clipboard? What would you pay for this? Side note, if any of you guys are ever doing pricing theory, never actually ask someone how much they pay for it. They'll go for the lowest number that you have on there. Instead, ask what they'd actually buy in related to it. So in other words, you say, not how much would you spend, but what do you think this is worth? Here's 8 other different products in this sheet. Point to the one that you think this is of similar value. That's a much better way to find pricing theory.
Did the products have prices?
Yeah. And it's basically like, do you think this is chapstick? Do you think this is this type of shampoo? And we actually have the brand names on there as well. So specifically, to test the original assumption, we were just like, hey, before we go out and buy a ton of soap, before we go out and pay for an office space, before we go and try to raise money, we just want to see if someone's actually going to do this. So here's the second thing we did. We were annoyingly persistent. You guys all know this, But the reason we got into our first Whole Foods region is because we just didn't stop. We kept on going into their stores, we kept on calling them, we kept on emailing them, we kept on sending them like basically like Morse code until eventually they were like, security, they're back. And I'm like, thanks help. And they were just like, okay, seriously, like stop coming into our stores, stop emailing us, stop calling us, stop. And instead of you basically like consistently freaking us out, we're just gonna give you one store. And we're gonna see how you do in that one store. Last year, March 2012, we got into our first store. We went from 1 store to 8. We went 8 stores to a region. We went from one region to another region to another region, another region to another region. We just kept on expanding and expanding and expanding. There's a lot of stores right now. There's still many more we can be in. Lots of coffee, a little sleep, etc. But we started with a simple test. Before we quit our day jobs, and actually for about like a year and a half before we actually went full-time on this, we still kept our full-time jobs. So, first thing is test your assumptions. Next thing, your mom, your dad, your family, your friends will lie. It's not because they're bad people, it's just because they don't want to disappoint you. If you said, I'm selling bags of air, they'd be like, I'll buy one. Sure. It'll be great. You'll be Mark Zuckerberg in no time. You're like, thanks, Mom. Really? They gave me a laser pointer. Your friends will lie. They're not bad people. They're just your friends. So the really important metric is this. It's about repeat customers. Even if it's web tech, service, consumer product goods, if it's consulting, it's whatever it may be, you're basically looking at, will someone buy this again and again and again after they've bought it from you once? That's real metrics. So vanity metrics are like, we have this many Facebook likes, everyone loves us. And you're like, but unless the Facebook people are buying from you, it really doesn't matter. We have this many page views, and like, this is awesome. Unless you're advertising, it really doesn't matter. The real metrics for us were, when we got into our first Whole Foods store, we sold like crazy. But then, unfortunately, it went like this. And we were like, what's going on? The problem is that the price point was too high. People would buy it once, they wouldn't buy it again. We didn't realize that until we went out and failed. It's like getting punched in the face. You see how this is going to be a consistent theme. But seriously, for us, it was like, okay, if we can only sell this once, what are the problems? And we just started asking people. We asked our buyers, we asked our customers, we asked everyone in between. We just kept on going to them and saying like, hey, how can we make this better? And eventually, some people who knew a lot more than we did said, your price is too high. No one's gonna buy, even in the natural channel, even at Whole Foods, $6.99, too expensive. What's the right price? $4.99. So we dropped it $2, we saw sales skyrocket up 70%. So here's the really interesting part. When you're starting your company and you prove the original assumption that people will pay for this, because ultimately, it's like equity. Someone giving you money for something is something extremely precious for them that they are then deciding that whatever offer you have is greater than whatever amount of work they put into that they've received. Basically, money is precious. It's a part of them. If they're willing to give a part of their work and labor to whatever you've done, that's pretty special. But then get it a second time, a third time, a fourth time, and a fifth time, and now you're onto something. Here's something interesting. We look at a bunch of different companies that are smaller than us and bigger than us, and we are either, if we're looking at competitors, we are more afraid of the competitors that have a smaller amount of stores but are selling faster in those like 50 stores than a store like a competitor that's in like 10,000 stores and is selling very slow. Because to us, that means that the brand loyalty of that specific product is so much higher that if they were to expand, they could potentially hurt us. But then also, like when we're talking to investors, their question isn't how many stores are you in? The question is, what are your same store sales? Show me the ratio. Show me how many units you're using per week. So that's what I mean by tracking real metrics. Advisory board. And this doesn't have to be an advisory board. It's just, no offense, old people. People who know what they're doing. I am 25. I will be the first to tell you, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't. Now I'm going to tell investors? No. Maybe after they already put money in. Like, hey sucker, that $250,000 just running our company? Right, no, I don't do that, kind of. But seriously, the way that I look at this is surround yourself with people who know a lot more than you. Specifically what we did is we got a bunch of experts for these guys. We got a couple people who helped build 7th Generation, and then we got a couple people from Procter & Gamble and Unilever, and we made them sign NDAs, and we said, don't please share our P&Ls and our balance sheets and all these type of things with other people, but we need your help. And they said, well, you're doing this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, this wrong. Your packaging sucks, your price point is off, you don't have distribution, you need to work with brokers, and these are all the things that you're doing wrong. And basically, after about like 6 months of being pummeled, we started really seeing the benefit of us listening. Here's one of the things, right? Lots of people look to Steve Jobs and say, I am going to be the arrogant choice word in the room, and somehow I'm going to be a visionary that's going to allow me to get to where I need to go. Steve Jobs had mentors. And a lot of people aren't Steve Jobs. More importantly, most people shouldn't try to be like him. Instead, there are countless amounts of founders and CEOs and C-level individuals who built companies through being humble and listening. What we often say with Soapbox is that the same skill set it takes to actually start something, the ego and hubris that, like, for us, we're going to go up against Procter & Gamble and Unilever, and yeah, we're going to somehow like do this, is the exact opposite skill set of how to grow something. Being egotistic really only takes one moment, and that's you deciding that, like, oh, I'm going to quit my day job and actually do this because I've proven the assumption and people are buying this. That moment, the ego stops, and you're like, no, I don't know what I'm doing, oh Lord. How do you get advisors? How do you get investors? It's actually not that complicated. It's really not. Very simple saying that you guys probably have heard before, but if you want money from investors, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money. You build relationships with investors by calling them up and saying, I know your minimum portfolio is $1 million. I know it's $10 million. I know you don't look at companies like us until X amount. I just want to pick your brain. I'm really impressed with your portfolio. I want to talk to you. Their whole job is to look at deal flow. And the fact that you're not calling them up being like, I'm not telling you my idea, it's the best thing since Facebook, I know it's going to be like a gazillion-dollar company, and you should meet with us. And they hear tons of those pitches, and guess what? They don't care. They don't. But if you call them up and say, hey, I have an idea, we're not that far along, I'd love to talk with you, I know we're not in your investment portfolio, you're basically giving them an out. Because these guys, as scary as VC firms or angels look, they really just, they want to look at deal flow. They want to help entrepreneurs. The returns on angel investment in VC, like you have to invest in 10 companies with the hope that one of those actually works, and like 3 of them are stable, the rest are going to fail. That's usually the batting odds for investors. So specifically, handwritten notes, LinkedIn, cold calling, being so persistent, they will just stop. They will just be like, God, fine, we'll have a meeting. And then, yeah.
Just a quick question. I know that VC is for venture capitalists, but what is angel investors?
Oh, so the reason angel investors are called angel investors is because they're taking such a big risk on you. Usually investment like firms. So like, unless you're coming out of like Y Combinator, how many of you guys know like Y Combinator? Just by a show of hands. So Y Combinator is an incubator. Incubator is basically they take like 10 different companies, they put it together in like a 3-month, a 6-month program, and they like teach you as many different skills as possible. And then from there, like these companies that graduate from this incubator programs get like valuations of like 20 million, 15 million, 10 million. They're absurdly high valuations, which actually then hurt the company later on, but that's a whole other separate conversation. But most companies aren't going to have that opportunity. So if you're trying to get money in your company, before you're asking anyone for money, you should be just showing results. Before we got our first $50,000 check into SoapBox, we actually had to be in a Whole Foods region by ourselves. And we went to that investor and said, here are our sales, this is what we're doing, we need your money to do X. This is use of funds. And we talked to like tons of them, and they kept on saying, I'm usually not the first mover. I don't want to write the first check. Come back to me in 6 months. Do this, do that. And they basically are, and I hate to swear, but this is something that we call investors, they're showing the shits. It's show high interest and stall. You're like, oh, this is the coolest thing in the world. You guys are geniuses, rock star founders. You guys are gonna do this. It's amazing. It's gonna let me buy your coffee. Let me buy your dinner. And then finally, and you email them a week later, like, yeah, let's do this. Here are my agreement papers. And they're like, let's get back to you next week. And then next week comes, and another week. So with investors, the hardest money is the first money. It's that first money in. And I hate to say this, but it's like an old boys club, 100%. Because once you get that first money, that guy wants to bring all his friends in, all of them. And the reason being is because he's 50, 100, 150 in on this business, and he doesn't want to see this business go belly up because it doesn't have enough cash. So he's going to call up his friend and be like, hey, Bob, hey, Devon, hey, I'm 50 in on this. You should be 52. And all of a sudden, that first money in basically gets everything going. So, investors, ask for advice, don't ask for money. Hardest money is first money. First two investments, your series, basically your seed and your series A, they're not investing in the company, they're investing in you. They're investing in you and the management. That's it. You may have a great idea, but if you look at some of the best ideas out there, like, so Groupon's not in a great state right now, but Groupon started as basically a social platform to get like parks clean. And they did a pivot to Groupon. But there were investors in the pivot. They didn't invest in the pivot, they invested in Andrew. That's the biggest, when you're talking with investors, they're not sizing up the idea or the market potential. Yeah, they kind of are, but at the early stages, they're investing in you. So you build that relationship, and you ask for advice, and then you follow through on that advice, and then you call them again, and then again, and then again, and eventually they're just like, I really like you, and I'm gonna put 50 in, and then I'm gonna be your lead and help you get 250, 300, 500, whatever your seed is more. So that's that. Listen, sounds really simple, but it's actually not. Listening to your customers is one of the hardest things that a lot of companies just can't get past. For example, sometimes companies are just like, oh, like, hey, I can go out and make this product, and especially the entrepreneurs that believe that they are truly genius, that they just see something the rest of the market hasn't seen. That's why there's such a failure rate, is that at a certain point you have to realize that either the idea isn't working, the original assumption or hypothesis that you had about whatever the market need was isn't working, and you have to switch. We started with the idea that the social mission will sell the soap even if we were selling just a slightly inferior product. The true math, like what we found out is that after the first purchase, she, is our target customer, is usually she, doesn't care. It has to all be about the quality of the purchase. That's it. The social mission then becomes a cherry on top. But, I mean, it makes sense, retrospectively. She's buying something that's replacing her herbal essence or her dial or her Dove. If she's going to be doing that, then it has to be just as good. But for us, we went in this with this assumption that we're like, this makes sense, we know what we're doing, and when the data came back saying that we were dead wrong, we had to listen to it. Last thing about building something. You don't need to quit your day job to start something. You do need to quit your day job to scale it. It's a big, big difference. You don't have to quit to start. You do have to quit to scale. You will know when that time is. One of the biggest things I see most, because we get tons of calls, and also like my information's at the end of this PowerPoint. Usually I'm a lot more funny, but I think it's the lack of coffee, so I apologize. The Omaha people know exactly what I'm talking about. And they're like, I went to the Midwest CEO thing. By this time, I was like doing a jig while throwing soap at people. Sorry you guys missed out. But anyways, specifically, they're laughing because it's true. So, and also you guys are like, you are between me and food. So wrap this thing up, Mr. Simnick. All right, Sudsy, whatever. So, specifically, we've seen a lot of entrepreneurs fail, even with the best idea and great traction, because they now have to pay the bills, and they give up just before that breaking point. So, it's working now. I actually had this slide where the whole lyrics were there, and I was like, that's not. I used to be a former 5th and 6th grade teacher. I was saying in this video guys earlier, they were just like, we can move around, and like that's the only way to keep people awake at this time. But seriously, like, I used to be a former 5th and 6th grade teacher. I taught in a pretty rough area of Philadelphia through Teach for America. And there were a couple times where like I was late at night, I'm like, this is the best lesson plan ever. And like I would have full swear words in there. And it was funny because some of the classes that I taught, like we would do like say-alongs, like I would be like, and I read this sentence and you read this sentence. And this one time, like I'm clicking through and I'm like, and I say this, and all the kids were just like, ah! You know, it's like, ah! My principal was like, what? And I was like, oh, I'm fired. So that's why they're on a boat. But let's say it's working now. Like the idea took off. It's working. All of a sudden, everyone who ever naysayed you're basically like, we're shelved in stores, like. This is my like cover photo on Facebook, and I'm Instagramming this every second, and like, oh, I'm tweeting like the fact that I'm standing in a store, and like, and we did that. And my friends are like, oh, like, congratulations for the soap, Dave. Like, stop blowing up my newsfeed. So like, really, like we were like, yeah, it works. Now what? This is the second part. So you built it, it's running. You may still be losing money because you're trying to grow faster, or you have a tech startup and you're just hoping that somehow you're going to come up with a monetization policy somewhere in the future, Twitter. But really, you're trying to figure out like, how am I going to lead this? Because depending on who you take money from, you're never going to be your own boss. That's one of the things that always scares me when entrepreneurs, when I ask them, I'm like, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? They're like, I want to be my own boss. I'm like, well, you better be homeless. Because you're never your own boss. Either your customers are your boss, or your investors are your boss. It's a sacred pact. They gave you money in one of the most risky things. You have better odds going to Vegas and basically putting it all on red than like putting it into like small little startup companies. Really, that's why angel investors are called angel investors. They just have a belief that somehow you, out of thin air, are going to make this work. So specifically, when you're looking at this, you're like, okay, I've reached this big hurdle. I've done this. That's great. Now what? Here are some lessons that I've learned. Number one, lead by example. There are many different types of leadership, but number one is that as soon as you start getting a staff of over like 5 to 10, currently SoapBox is around 10, and I say this like fully knowing that someone in my staff may watch this. They think all I do sometimes when I'm not in the office is like I'm chilling out in a bathtub somewhere with like, beautiful, and I'm just like, yes, like, yeah, beautiful soap, right, exactly. I need you around more often, especially when I used to teach. But specifically, like, people think I'm not working because there's a lot of glamour with entrepreneurship, but really, the people who are in for it for both either the money, the glamour, or that they don't want a boss, usually the people that I see fizzle out. Because this is extremely hard. You gotta really love what you're doing. And you gotta really love building something. Even when it doesn't look like there's any chance of making money. So specifically, for your team to believe that you actually have the right to lead them, it's almost like you're a servant leader. In a sense that you have to be working twice as hard as they are in order for them to feel that you're working just as hard as they are. It's really hard because not only do you have to actually be doing your own work product and getting new investors and fundraising and making sure that you have cash flow and making sure that the product is good and making sure that you have distribution brokerage, you're basically overseeing all of it. But you also have to be managing them. That's the hard thing, especially if you do it when you're young. I have a couple people on my team that are older than me. There are many times where they, in the back of their mind, I know this, and we've actually had this like come to Jesus conversation where I just ask them like, what is the issue? And they're like, you're 25. That's it. I'm like, I will go dye my hair if it makes you the work product better. Like, I'm just for men, touch of gray, I'm in. Tell me what needs to be done. But like really, you have to work twice as hard. This stuff is the fun stuff. I love this. But there are nights where, I mean, I have my friend in the back, basically, Prava, probably on a wave. But she'll like G-chat me at 1, she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm working. And then she'll like wake up in the morning and be like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm working. And she's like, no, really, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm working. I love it, which helps. But it's really hard to lead people when either they're near your age or at a startup because there's just so much work to do. And it's also, it's not a corporation. There's not a 9 to 5. There's work all the time. So how do you do this as a founder? How do you do this as a leader of a startup? You have to know you're never going to feel the same way about your company as you do. Why? It's not theirs. It's not theirs. It's not their baby. Even if you give them equity, it's not theirs. The best type of employees we've had, and we've let some go, and we've brought some in, the best type that we hire are the ones that want to one day go do it themselves. Because this is boot camp for them. So you've proven the idea, you have repeat customers, you're growing, you're putting fuel to the fire, you have investors coming to you and asking for meetings instead of you begging and pleading and offering to walk their dog in order to talk to them in like 5 minutes, right? Instead of doing that, now you're starting to grow. How do you manage people? Difficult. But if you show that you're willing to work just as hard as they are, which actually is working twice as hard, they usually match. Communication. A lot of people say this. Oh, communication is so important. Leadership is about relationship, open, honest, professional, these type of things. Communication is still really, 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 really difficult. Some of the biggest problems I've seen that happen in our company is when people don't know what the other person's doing. So I have a co-founder. He's absolutely amazing. The co-founder is you. And Dan and I, when we don't know what the other person is doing, we start to build resentment towards each other because we feel like I'm either doing more from my perspective or he's doing more from his perspective. Oftentimes, it's never the case because we're both fully invested in this. We're both doing 80 to 100 hours a week. But the big thing is that we don't know what the other person's doing. This happens in relationships all the time, right? Like you don't talk to someone like your boo for like a week or something like that, and you're just like, hey girl, what's up? I saw that picture on Facebook with that guy. He's cute. Not, right? So like, the problem is that oftentimes it's just communication. Same thing within a company. So then, one of the things that we often see, or just like from what I've seen in like either friends in other companies or companies that are bigger than us, is oftentimes the founder can't be the CEO because there's a different skill set. The founder basically is able to come up with really cool ideas and a vision and says this is going to work and this is the assumption that we need to test. But as soon as it starts getting to managing people, that often isn't the same skill set. Trying to find someone who often is really good at being a founder and both a CEO and being able to manage people is really difficult. There's something even bigger. So now when you actually start talking about company size, you look at basically like 1 to 10 employees, 10 to 50 employees, and then 50 to 1,000 and beyond. Very, 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 very different skill sets. And also trying to keep the culture, which we'll talk about in a second, that started here and make it go all the way there is incredibly difficult. So, when it comes to communication, our first value at Soapbox is that we are open, honest, and professional with everyone. What this means is that we allow anyone, and this we actually took this from Toyota, and I'm going to butcher the name basically, but Toyota has a policy where anyone in the production line, anyone can stop the production. And basically say, we're done, like we're stopped. Because if they see something that's going wrong, and they need to fix it, then they're going to stop it. So that's one. Number two is anyone in the production line, janitorial to CEO, there are basically big dry erase boards in their factories where someone can walk over and say, I have an idea about how to make things better. If you allow that type of open, honest, and professional communication to happen within your company, you're ultimately allowing innovation to come from all aspects. Here's the hardest thing about open, honest, and professional. It requires a crap ton of humility from the founders. I'm serious. And vulnerability. Because for someone to come up and say, you know that idea that you had that you really want to do, and I know it's your pet project, it sucks. It actually blows. But I wouldn't say that, although I just did. I'm like, thanks, Dennis. Dennis. So I'm just kidding. That's actually Dan. No, that's really Dennis. So point is, like, it requires vulnerability to have that type of communication. But if you don't, oftentimes, and this we see this all the time in corporate America, where basically there's this unnecessary tension between this one unit, and you're like, why is this? And then like they bring in a consulting team, and it's a kumbaya session, like everyone thinks that like, I just wasn't understanding you. Oftentimes the root of it is just there isn't open communication. I said this earlier, but I'll say it again. It's tracking real metrics. Dan and I, as founders, used to think that the biggest important metrics was how many hours per week people were in the office. False. We thought that if we were there, people should be there. And we actually started doing some pretty innovative things. We started moving our desks closer to the door, because we were like, we're gonna guilt them if they're leaving early. And like our employees were like, bitch please, you've had me since 7. Right? And they would just be out. Like they would be gone. And I would be like, bah! It's not the real metrics. They're vanity metrics. It's the same thing about like Facebook likes. Facebook like doesn't mean anything unless you're Facebook. It may mean awareness. Great. Are people buying your whatever you're offering? And if you're looking and doing a non-for-profit, are they donating? Are they supporting? Are they coming out and giving your hours? We, as a company, thought that if they were at the office, they must be doing work. False. Back to Facebook. But really, like, we thought that just because people were in there grinding, or basically not like grinding as all of you just thought of high school. But now, good thing is everyone in this room is old enough to know that like, in about like 20 years, like, grinding is going to be twerking, and God knows what's going to happen after that. But our kids are going to be laughing like, remember the good old days in high school, bro, when everyone was twerking on each other? And we're like, oh no. Which is funny, because we tried to dance for my 6th graders, and we just shut that down. Like 30 minutes into it, we're like, no, this is done. But anyways, yeah, fun. But specifically, tracking real metrics. Real metrics. It wasn't about how many hours they put in the office. It was about what they actually did with their work product. What we found is that some of the most efficient people, the people that got the most done, really wanted their weekends. And that meant that if they were not answering emails on the weekends, it didn't mean that they weren't productive. It just meant that that's what they decided that their life-work balance is going to be. Now, there's a caveat to this. In the founding year, or the founding years, these people don't fly. As a founder, or the founding team, you're on 24/7. Because when Target emails you and says, hey, where's the EDI paperwork? You better answer back within a minute. That's the difference. So for us, real metrics was realizing that there's a difference between your staff and a founder. And although we wanted everyone feeling exactly the same way that we did about our company, sometimes that's just not the case. So, one of our best investors, the best investor advisor that we've had, told us plan as if plan A will fail, that B will fail, that C will fail, that all the way down to Z will fail. Everything will fail. And we're just like, this is really gloomy. And he was like, no, seriously, everything will fail. So I'll use one of our body washes as an example. This was great when we first rolled this out. Didn't pop anyone's attention. Just people really didn't see it on the shelves. So when we rolled the first one out, we brought it to basically our meeting of a bunch of like our advisors and mentors. We said, what do you think? And they said, ooh, okay, it's kind of good. And then Adam spoke up and was like, did you guys plan for everything to fail? We're like, well, we think this is good at work. And it's like, no. So plan A was that this is a bigger bottle than most other like natural like body washes in the sets at Whole Foods or Harris Teeter. We roll out to HEB down, I'll stop the plug, but anyways, HEB down in Texas in December, Target next year, blah, 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 blah. But the point is, this specifically is kind of big. Okay, great. Now what? Plan B was we're going to put color in the natural sets. There's not a lot of color. They usually all look like burlap or like dark, earthy type of stuff. So then we added different color and did a color block with all the different bottles. Plan C was we actually paid for like 10% of our profit margins to go down in order just to have this little hang tag there. The thing is ridiculously expensive, but we did it because we thought that A and B were going to fail. So we wanted just one more thing to catch her attention as her as our target market, but one more thing to catch her attention as she was walking down the aisle. That's really, so plan A, plan B, plan C. Now plan D was we worked with each retailer that we launched with to try to get end cap placements, and we tried to basically do like high-low like retail placements, and then we tried to actually do coupons and shelf toppers and all that type of thing. Any major retailer that we launched with, we were just like, this is going to fail. Here's the beauty. If A works, then you have B, C, D all supporting A. So you have to plan as if everything's going to fail and come up with as many different contingencies and actually be using all of those contingencies or putting those contingencies into effect the moment that you're putting A into effect. So if A works, it's not that you need plan B, but plan B, C, and D are all actually supporting plan A. That's the beauty of this. Here's the other thing. You've probably heard this a lot, especially with entrepreneurs. You have to fail fast. It's not that you should actually be actively looking for failure. It's just that you should be doing small cycles and iterating. Just like I was saying in Test the Assumption, don't quit your day job before you test it and show that there's actually repeat customers. It's the same thing with any time you roll something out. Don't buy 80,000 units like we did of your product because then we were in a serious cash flow crunch and we almost went bankrupt. Don't do that. Don't. Instead, buy 10,000 and see how you can actually change it the next time around. Same thing with webs, or basically like web or tech entrepreneurship. I think it's TurboTax basically shows you 10,000 different versions of their site in the month of April. They test 10,000 different UI models. That's amazing. And they're just trying to figure out how much longer you're going to stay on the site or if it increases usefulness. So I'm starting to see the I'm hungry faces. This is the biggest difference on how you're actually strategizing. There's vision, there's strategy, there's tactics. For example, vision for SoapBox is we empower customers with the ability to make the world a better place through simple quality purchases. Tactics, we do this through product innovation, we do this through excellent customer support and transparency on our social missions. On the ground, this is what this is like. Hello. Hi, we're FedEx, and your truck of a shipment that's coming from Maryland to Indiana is on fire. Excuse me? Yes, the truck is on fire. Hold on. Ah! Click. Okay, yeah, let's deal with that. I'm gonna put you on my operations manager. I look to my founder. My founder is like, "What's up?" I'm like, "Truck's on fire." Truck what? And then muted again. Colorful words, basically, and then I hand the phone over to him. Tactics is how you do it. And also, what's interesting is the person that you choose as your co-founder or team of co-founders, you have to find people at different levels. And oftentimes, if you're this guy, you can be that guy only at the very beginning and once every so often. Seriously. Vision guys are great. They started, but they can't keep on doing vision because there's going to be 5, 6 years of you just doing tactics. So what I'm saying here is, if you're the type of guy that's pie in the sky, you see big trends, you want to do that on a day-to-day basis, entrepreneurship, starting at the ground level, may not be for you. And I know that this is supposed to be like a rah-rah leadership session, but the reason I'm saying that is because entrepreneurship is a lot more at this level. Because you don't have departments of people to help you out. You can't call in the HR department to figure out an employee issue. And you can't call in the sales department when an account that you thought you would have is now not going to go through. You're doing all of it for a while. So the vision, that's cool. That's the fun stuff. The tactics, that's 98 of the other percent. I'll say more like 90, and then I'll give this about 8, and I'll give this about 2. Strategy's fun too. You basically break out the dry erase boards, and these are all the things, if you ever see like the ads for entrepreneurship camps, or like, you know, like, come to our school, it has entrepreneurship programs. You always see people with like dry erase boards, like you're just like, yes. Like you will see classrooms of dry erase boards on the ceiling and on the walls. And on the floor. Like, there'll be dry erase board markers in your dorms. And like, you know what I mean? You're just like, dang, someone's got it in with the dry erase board company. But like really, specifically, it's about this. Where'd my laser pointer go? All right, I'm done. It's about on the ground. So when it comes to entrepreneurship and when it comes to basically leading, going back to that example stage, your employees and your like first 10, 5, 3 employees want to see you doing the hard work too. Okay, this is one of the last slides. Basically, anyone know of despair.com?
Yeah.
Yeah, so despair.com is for those people in the room that, I don't want to insult you, but we're a special group of people. You guys know the motivational posters where there's like an eagle and it's like leadership. You'll never know until you spread your wings. Right, so hang in there, kitten, and you're like, oh yeah. So Despair is a really smart company where they put the same type of photos, but yet the worst thing to put in the little title section. There's like a picture of like French fries and it says potential. Not everyone gets to be an astronaut when they grow up. And you're like, that's awful, right? But it's also kind of funny. So specifically with teamwork, the reason I put this picture up there is that it's about culture, and a lot of us actually get like kind of hooked up or just like focused on like how do we consistently build culture and build vision statements and mission statements. It's also about hiring very, very slowly. You're bringing someone in, and if it's under 10 employee level, you're bringing someone in at a crucial level, and they're going to be there for the long haul. And ultimately, it's about how they are helping build that culture or take it away. So hire slowly, fire quickly. There's a lot of companies, HR managers, that have a no asshole rule. Like really, it's basically what it sounds like, is if you're a bad person or you're spoiling a group of it, you're not going to stay hired at that company. So here's another thing. You're never too important. If you're the CEO, if you're the founder, and someone emails you and they're just starting a company, you are never too important to take that call. And here's why. For a self-serving reason, you have no idea who that person knows. That's the selfish reason. We've gotten so many meetings and so many connections to retailers, distributors, brokers, new co-packers, packaging makers, advertising agencies, like legitimately just crazy amounts of people through the calls that we took that we felt like we were too important to take. Also, we, SoapBox, and we still have a long way to go, would never be where we are unless people did the same thing for us. So, kind of a recap. Don't quit your day job until you've actually tested the assumptions and you've seen that really starting to take off. Track real metrics. prove the idea, and then add fuel. Surround yourself with people who know what they're doing and are smarter than you. Oftentimes I have a saying where I want to be the dumbest person in the room when it comes to our team. And then also listen and repeat. Fail fast, but really it's listen to what the failure has to teach you and repeat as fast as possible. I see some pens going down. I'm humbled, but let me know when it's cool to turn. Time? Cool. Here's this one. I'll go back to this on this. Dude, that's my email, that's my number. If you have an idea and I can help, let me know. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.